Very excited for you guys to be here and appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn about something I think could be a really big game changer for a lot of the folks in this call. This is something that typically a lot of folks know very little about, if anything at all. And it's a topic that once you really start to consider, it opens up a lot of possibilities in all of our lives. And it's something that honestly, I had followed someone on YouTube called the Nomad Capitalist for a while. And it was kind of like an escape fantasy for me. I was like, oh, this idea of a second passport, living overseas, that sounds cool. I did a study abroad period when I was in college, but I'd never really taken it seriously as a real lifestyle opportunity until I met Matt. So Matt has worked with us here at Freedom Travel for about a year now, and he'll do a little bit more of an intro about what his business does, but he is one of the preeminent experts in this space in terms of understanding the global game of getting multiple passports, getting visas across the world, creating an international lifestyle that both increases your quality of life and living in other countries, and potentially, depending on the strategies that you want to implement, can mitigate taxes. Now, this is not financial advice, right? Matt's going to just share firsthand things that he's learned, firsthand things that he's helped clients with, and a little bit more about what he does. But ultimately, for those that are interested in expanding your ability to have more options, more choices, to live life more on your terms in terms of where you live, how you travel, the places you base in, the residencies you have, this is a guy who not only knows a lot himself, but also runs an event that has the top experts across the world attending. So if he doesn't know the answer, he'll know the person who does. I went to go speak at this event in Miami in the fall, and I was blown away. It was like every country that you could think of, the top boutique agencies, immigration attorneys, tax strategists, all these people from across the world were attending that event that Matt hosts, which he does multiple year around the world, to learn from him. Okay. So what we're gonna do, Matt, I'm gonna ask you a couple questions first, and we'll just kind of jump in from like interview style. And then what we're gonna do, guys, is Matt's gonna share some things with us presentation style, and then there'll be time for Q&A at the end, okay? Now this is being recorded too. Definitely wanna stick around live though, so you can get questions. And for those that wanna get additional help, there will be an opportunity for a handful of you guys. This is gonna be a limited thing to book consultations with Matt. He doesn't do a lot of these, so we do have some limited spots, but he was gracious enough to give us the opportunity to open that up to you guys, okay? So, Matt, first off, good to see you. We're grabbing dinner here tonight in Lisbon with a bunch of fun entrepreneurs. So good to be connected with you here over Zoom. And as we're jumping in, can you just give a little bit more of a little background on your story, how you got into this, and what your firm does? And then I'll jump into a couple other questions before we kick it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Eli. And let me know if my audio is good. I'm on headphones, but I can take them off. Can everyone hear me okay? Get some nods? Yeah?
Yep.
Good? All right, cool. So I have lived abroad since I was 21. I was living in the States. I graduated and I just thought to myself, I know there's so much more out there in the world, and I want to see that. I don't want to go the typical route. I don't want to, settle down, get a job in the US and do that thing. I moved to China when I was 21. So I've lived as much time or more time now abroad than I ever lived in the US. And during my time overseas, I had the opportunity to come across, my first foray was coming across a group called the Seychelles International Business Authority. And the Seychelles is a tax-free country for purpose of people who have companies registered there, but do conduct business elsewhere. And I was absolutely fascinated by the fact that you could essentially operate a company tax-free. And I Googled offshore financial centers in the world, and at the time there was 42 of them. And this, not knowing at the time, this sent me on a journey to really figure out how I could help investors, individuals, and firstly myself, to live anywhere, pay little or no tax, hold multiple citizenships or multiple residencies, and really just live life on your own terms. And I later found out that the reason for that, or the reason I was so driven by that, is, my personal mission is to remove all barriers so we can have unlimited possibility. And I think some of the most common barriers that people face, whether they know it or not, is one, the passport that they were born with, so the country that they and the nationality that they have and where they're born. Two is the policies, especially around tax or freedom of movement for that passport. The next big one is the wealth inheritance, corporation income tax, all these things. And if you can optimize and master how to move these levers in your favor, it is possible to live without paying tax, it is possible to live anywhere you want in the world, and it is possible to have a portfolio of passports and residencies, which give you more optionality than a single passport will. So what I really deem complete fiscal and travel freedom. So if any country makes some policies against you, raises the tax rates, reverses things that negatively impact you, you have the optionality to just get up and move. You get to go where, taking a phrase from Andrew Henderson, is go where you're treated best. And of course, that's not an option if you have a single passport, because you need a place to legally reside elsewhere. And I just didn't want that situation to happen to me. So I've spent the better part of my life figuring out how to do all these things.
I love it. Yeah, it's so fascinating to really just try that on for a minute. If everyone's here listening, just like imagine for a second, what would it be like if you had that type of optionality? And I think for a lot of us, I mean, our company is called Freedom Travel Systems. Like the word is right, and it's the first word. It's freedom and this ability to live abroad. But for me, I'm a fan of America. I love it. There's a lot of bad things going on in the States and things you can get up in arms about, but there's also unbelievable amounts of freedoms, unbelievable amounts of opportunities. So for me, this idea of maybe giving up the U.S. passport is something that I don't think I would want to do. Some people do it, some people don't. But because I know you'll go more in depth in this, but for anyone that's like, well, do I have to give up the U.S. passport? I know there's a difference based on tax outcomes, but there are strategies that you can leverage for some of these lifestyle benefits without giving up a U.S. passport. Is that correct, Matt?
Absolutely. Yeah. So before we get into it, I've made the assumption that everyone on this call is a U.S. citizen. I've also made the assumption that they may or may not want to live full-time overseas. I've also made the assumption that they're entrepreneurs or have some kind of entrepreneurial activity that gives them flexibility to structure, that income. So what I'm going to talk about in the presentation, and as you can imagine, I typically work with high net worth individuals and families. It's all quite private, but I did put together, I don't have a lot of publicly facing materials, but I did put together a specific presentation for your group, Eli, that kind of outlines at a high level the leverage that anyone can use, and try to make that as clean and easy to understand as possible without getting into a lot of the minutia. Of course, the minutia is where we come in and can help you, and happy to dive into any and all details necessary if we happen to work together.
Awesome. Beautiful. And Matt, I'd love to just when you're thinking about planning for this, it can take, depending on what you're trying to do, different amounts of effort and time to put together one of these international strategies with multiple passports. Just give people a bite-sized way to think, like, what's the time horizon I'm looking at? Is this something you can do in a few months? Is it, no matter what, it's a several year play? How does time play into this?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, within 3 months, if you decided today on this day that you were willing to either live overseas or you're willing to set up companies overseas or get overseas residencies, you can have multiple parts of this plan implemented within a 3-month time horizon. It can be really fast if you're motivated to do so.
Cool. Beautiful. I mean, that's awesome. And that's cool, because I think when some people hear, oh man, like some of these countries, the time to get a passport could be 10 years. And it's like, wow, that's pretty far out. But there are things that you could do that could be even faster if it's important to you. So With that, guys, I saw a bunch of your questions in the chat. Matt, just super excited to have you in here. The last question I'm going to ask is, for you personally, how has living abroad and spending more time abroad just changed your overall worldview?
Oh, it's night and day, my friend. So I learned Mandarin Chinese. So that was probably the polar opposite of what I think it would be like if I was living in America full time. So I learned Mandarin Chinese. I did not speak English at one point for about 8 months. So I didn't speak, when I say didn't speak English, meaning I was so immersed that there was not an English speaker at all within my circle. I actually had kind of forgotten how to speak English when I went back to visit my parents. Like, the words were coming, quite difficult. So that was the first, literal 180, opposite end of the spectrum, culturally, language, etc. And then I've spent the last 5 years in Europe. I've spent time 3+ months in Central and South America. And my next big continent is going to be Africa. So I'll be spending significant time in Africa over the next year. And Freedom Travel Systems has made this very easy flying business class on points. So it makes world travel a lot easier, I'll tell you
I
that
love
much.
it, man. Cool. Awesome. And yeah, for those that don't know, by the way, I think I know the majority of you guys, but for those that don't know, our company, Freedom Travel Systems, helps people maximize their points for bucket list trips. Many of you guys are clients, some are not, some are friends that were invited in as guests and stuff. So if you have questions on that, feel free to reach out to me as well. Now, Matt, let's go ahead and dive into the presentation. Again, guys, I'm going to
Sure.
moderator in the questions. So at the end, we'll come back to those. If you have questions throughout the presentation, you can chat them in, but more than likely we'll come back to those at the end. So you can jump right ahead. I'll give you screen sharing access and we can take this thing away.
Awesome.
Awesome stuff.
So I can get this on.
Drop a
Just
one
give
in
me
the
a
chat.
moment.
You're already getting excited about the possibilities of what this could do for you. Just drop a one in there if you're feeling like, wow, this could be pretty cool. Give Matt some love here.
Yeah, just give me a second.
Cool. Take your time.
Get
Take your time. Awesome. I love it. Cool.
Let me know if you guys can see. Oh no, sorry. Give me a second.
Great. Nice. I think we can see. Yeah.
Can you guys see anything?
Your inbox popped up, but not your. I think if you go ahead and share your screen again, you'll be able to see the slides.
Yeah. Okay, there we go.
Cool. And guys, one of the things I'll just share, Matt, as you're jumping into this, so that we looked at personally in my family, and Matt, again, his team can help advise on this. It's very nuanced based on the situation, is your heritage, right? So like my family is Italian descent. We were looking into, second generation, third generation stuff. That's very nuanced based on the situation, but I'm sure many of you guys have that where you have a relative who's from a country, and oftentimes you may not have realized that that's even an option. So Matt, maybe we'll touch on that too, but go ahead, Matt, over to you.
Yeah, sure. So I want to take a step back just on the title of this presentation is Second Passport Secrets, but I want to take a step back, and I think this is something that will hit home with everyone. Assuming people are U.S. residents, whether your reason is for more wealth, whether your reason is for more spending power, whether your reason is more mobility, what I'm going to share with you over these short slides is essentially a way to, without changing anything in terms of what you're doing for work, your current passport situation, any of that, you can effectively double your income and 4x your net worth in a matter of in 10 years or less without doing anything different. And so just think about that for a second. So if you think about the levers that you have to move to do that, I'm going to talk about this in the next slide, but you can essentially immediately give yourself, you can 2x your income with very, very few moves, and then you can 4x your net worth over the next 10 years without doing anything different. So if your motivator isn't to have multiple passports and multiple residencies, but you have an inkling to spend more time out in the world and you just love to get rich while doing it, that's perfectly possible with the strategies I'm going to share. And if you're already a millionaire or multi-millionaire, these strategies will just skyrocket your net worth on top of it. Okay, so who am I? I'm the founder of the Alpine Investment Group. I've traveled the equivalent of 26 times around the planet, 60 plus countries. Most of these countries I've been to are countries where high net worth individuals are fleeing from, or entrepreneurs are fleeing from because of various political, socioeconomic, etc. reasons. I have multiple residencies and citizenships, and I've held over 150 conferences globally on this subject matter. So here's the promise. With the strategies, you can live anywhere, pay no tax, and 4x your net worth. And there's 4 major levers that you need to basically implement to get that outcome. The first one, and there's a lot of nuance to this, so please don't just copy and paste this and run out and try to do it yourself. Obviously, we need to know about your situation, but basic information that you need to know about each one. So the first major lever is structuring your income offshore. So as a U.S. citizen, you can have a U.S. holding company, an offshore operating company, avoid physical presence in the U.S., meaning there's a maximum number of days that you would spend in the United States per year. And the outcome that you could get by structuring this correctly would be 10.5% corporate profits tax. So if you just think about what you're paying now for corporate profit tax, it's possible to get down to 10.5%. Foreign earned income exclusion, which is basically roughly 125,000 US dollars tax-free of earned income plus a foreign housing allowance. And that's by taking a salary from an offshore holding company that you own. The next lever is optimizing your tax situation for, and Eli, if you have any questions on that, or if there's any burning questions where something wasn't clear, we can even stop in between each slide and
Awesome.
take a few questions.
Well, I'll keep it on the chat and field it for you.
Okay. The second one is either residing in a tax neutral jurisdiction or applying for a tax residency program, or the third lever is just don't become a tax resident of anywhere. So what that means to not be a tax resident of anywhere is effectively don't spend the minimum presence requirement in the United States to be considered a resident, which I'm not going to give you the official number because there's a formula. Like everything in the US tax is very complicated. So you can avoid being physically present for enough time to be a tax resident of any country, so you wouldn't have to apply for a tax program. But even inside Europe, I'll just give you an example of this. So there's a program in Portugal called the non-habitual resident program, which effectively can get you 0% capital gains, 0% dividends, and only 20% on earned income. But if you can imagine, if you're an entrepreneur, you can effectively structure all of your income as dividends or as capital gains, and you can get to a zero tax perspective from Portugal. Of course, you still have to report to the United States, but you can understand the next obvious step after that is if you are willing to give up your US passport, you could effectively be tax-free from a Portugal perspective. And there's some other programs out there. Spain has one, Paraguay has offshore income exemptions, UAE, no income tax. There's lots of different programs out there. And obviously we need to look at your particular life setup to choose the one that's best for you. But just understand that it is possible to get to a zero tax outcome in whatever country you're residing in overseas if you want to spend more than 183 days there. And if it's less than 183 days, it means you should not have to file taxes in that country. The next major lever, and unfortunately this is it's a sad thing, but the United States is one of two countries worldwide which taxes based on the citizenship you hold. So congratulations, most of us on this call won the lottery and landed in the hands of one of the two countries worldwide that taxes because you hold that blue document. So to get rid of US taxation, the only way to avoid your reporting obligations is to give up your US citizenship. That is a very complex process. It's not, it's complex in the sense that you need to do a lot of things to make sure you don't get yourself into a bad tax situation for the rest of your life. Again, US tax advisors, I have many that I work with who are specialists in that, if that's something that you may be interested in down the line. Next one is the compounding wealth strategies. And the reason I don't talk about a lot of things like investing in real estate, investing in, startups, investing in crypto, and I'm not an investment specialist, but I think there's some very easy compounding wealth, low risk strategies that everyone can do without feeling, nervous about, am I making the wrong decision, with my investment? And these are essentially foreign high yield savings accounts and investing in things like US indices, so SPY, QQQ, these are ETFs. And this is basically no-brainer type saving strategies that if you compound the savings that you're going to get on taxes and cost of living reductions, you can essentially tack on another $1 million to your net worth over about 10 years time, earning $125,000 as your salary. Just to understand, you don't have to be earning $250,000, $500,000 a year to get to that outcome. You can, just with the amount that you're going to be saving on taxes and the reduction of cost of living, you can essentially become a millionaire just by properly compounding those earnings. Any burning questions so far, Eli, or from anyone else?
I think just to clarify, so Rob asked, to what extent do the other three strategies depend on renouncing U.S. citizenship?
None of these strategies rely on, so getting to a tax neutral outcome does rely on you giving up your US passport if you have certain levels of income or if you're a company owner. But you can do the vast majority of these things without giving up your US passport, but just optimizing for US tax.
Beautiful. That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, guys, there's also different outcomes, right? Like one end of the spectrum is the tax side, and the other piece that you're talking about a little bit, maybe we'll get to it, but there's questions about the mobility piece, right? That doesn't even require a passport. Sometimes there's residencies, visas, stuff like that. So, cool. All right.
So I don't know if my buttons on the you guys can see this this table, right?
Yep.
Okay. Just to give you an idea, if we got you to a tax neutral perspective from whatever country you move to, you will save roughly 50% in your cost of living just by moving out of any major US city and moving to a major European city. And if we get you a tax neutral outcome, your effective the effective raise you're giving yourself is between 100% and 100 or 280%. So literally, you could be doubling or tripling your effective income without changing anything about your income source, just using some basic levers in the strategies that we're talking about.
So Matt, just to clarify what you're saying, you're basically saying if you were to essentially keep the tax situation you have in the US and do the equivalent, but live in Porto, for example, you're cutting the cost of everyday living by about 60%. That's essentially what you're saying, right?
Yeah. So if you are living full time in Porto and you are earning you're living full time in Porto, then more than let's just say you're spending less than the minimum physical presence in the United States, you would get this cost reduction factor because you would have the foreign earned income exclusion, and just living there, the cost of living is significantly lower.
Awesome.
So you get this cost reduction no matter what, but then if you get the equivalent tax savings because you're overseas resident, this effective column is what your net gain is going to be.
Amazing. That's awesome.
Okay, so just a few quick comparisons. So if you look at these major US cities, I found European equivalents. I've chosen Europe because it tends to be the most popular location for Americans to move, but you would find similar or even better outcomes if you were to move to the Caribbean or to South America. Those are two other, very attractive locations to go, and probably even higher. So Central and Caribbean, South America, you will probably even get you'll get cost savings even greater than this. So just comparison as a couple. Some people say, well, I have a family, it's going to be so expensive, private schools, blah, 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 all those things. That doesn't apply, okay? So you're still going to get the cost savings, whether you're single, couple, or a family of four, yeah? Basically, you're effectively doubling your spending power just by physically moving to another city. Cool? Okay. Just to show you what this, I just did this as a return on investment scenario. So if you're scared about moving abroad, maybe money will motivate you. I call this a low risk everyday millionaire strategy. So doing nothing different other than optimizing for tax and living abroad in some of these cities. If you were to compound those savings over a 10-year period of time, you're going to tack on anywhere between roughly 400,000 to 700,000 in net worth if you're earning a salary of 125,000. So you take all that savings, plow it into high yield savings or SPY, QQQ, basic ETFs. Okay, now let's go into the fast track residency or citizenship routes. So these are the gems. These are the ones that that very few people talk about, very few people know about. But the reason I've chosen these is because each one of these programs allows you either a low physical presence requirement or no physical presence requirement pathway to a second passport. And this also doesn't mean that you have to invest tons of money. You guys have probably heard of the Caribbean Citizenship by Investment programs or the Malta Citizenship by Investment program. You're talking a minimum of $250,000 to 1.25 million euros. These are no investment requirements to get these residency programs. So one of my personal favorites, because it's literally the biggest loophole that I've seen in this space currently, is starting at the bottom, is Armenia. So Armenia, you can apply completely remotely. You become a shareholder. So this is technically you're a shareholder of a public benefit organization in Armenia. You don't have to go there. You can do it completely remotely. You mail your passport to them. You do not have to spend any time in the country. After 3 years, there is a citizenship test, which is in Armenian, but they have had the same 38 questions on the citizenship test for the past 3 decades. And if you memorize the order of the questions, which the law firm we work with does, you can essentially hack the route to citizenship and never have to set foot in the country. You can apply from any consulate or embassy of Armenia worldwide. You might be thinking, why would I want to go to Armenia, or why would I want an Armenian passport? First of all, any passport that you can get that doesn't require you to physically go there and doesn't have a huge investment tied to it, it's just such an easy layup win, because you have at least one backup option, a second passport in case anything happens. But here's the hack all the way on the right, and this ties into the U.S. Citizenship renunciation strategy. Most people are of the mind that, yes, I might not want to be a U.S. citizen, but I'd love to be able to come back to the U.S. at some point if I need to spend time with family, friends, whatever. There's a loophole called, not really a loophole, America has done investor treaties or trading investor visa treaties or trading visa treaties with many countries in the world, and these are called the E2 and the E1 treaties. Essentially what that means is, let's say you got the Armenian passport, you gave up your US citizenship, you could manage a company in the United States that you invested in. Minimum investment is usually, say, 100 to 150,000 in your own company that you're managing. And you could apply for the E2 investor treaty visa because you are an Armenian passport holder, which allows you to spend up to nearly 120 days in the United States per year without becoming a tax resident again. So this is kind of the back door to get a second passport, give up US citizenship, not have to pay tax in the US, but still being able to spend significant time there. Some of these other very cool programs that exist out there. So Mexico will grant you permanent residency immediately. So there's some nuance to that, but permanent residence means effectively you don't have to do anything else other than renew your permit occasionally, and you're allowed to live, work, study, and be educated in Mexico. Argentina is similar, but it's super fast. It's only 2 years, but you do have to spend most of those 2 years there. Paraguay also is very attractive because it has an extremely attractive tax residence program, which is effectively zero tax for foreign earned income. And if you're wondering why you would want citizenship or residency in any of these, you'll notice that the visa-free countries are quite high for most of them. And most importantly, this gives you a loop back to the United States, which is the E2 or the E1 treaty with the USA. So those are four of my favorite no or very, very low investment requirements, low or no physical presence requirements, pathway to another great passport, and then a loophole or a backdoor, let's say, back into the United States if you still want to spend significant time there. See the questions piling up in the chat.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there's just one right now. Noah asked, have you heard anything about the $500,000 citizenship by investment program with Argentina getting finalized? That was one question. Then Timothy asked if anything's changed, that I think this was the last slide, with the new tax bill that's just passed in Congress. So those were the two questions.
So the Argentina program, I know it has been approved, but I've not seen the official application. Usually once the legislation is passed, they will be a guide that is published on which organizations within the country are responsible for receiving vetting and granting receiving vetting applications and the cards or citizenship. And as far as I know, we've not seen that information yet, but it's going to happen. And the second one is about what?
The second one was, has anything changed with these strategies? I actually have one or two more questions too, in relation to the tax bill that's passed from Congress.
Yeah.
Has anything changed?
Changing the strategies. So if you're referring to the big beautiful bill, I have not. Yeah, I always get scared when I see these names. The last couple ones, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that was a pretty scary one for expats. I have not seen what the Big Beautiful Bill has for taxes related to expats. I know that one thing that was up for potential revision was the strategy I mentioned earlier, which is the reduction of corporate income tax to 10.5%. I mentioned it on the first slide. Again, these things, I can take a quick look at it, but a U.S. tax advisor would definitely be able to help you navigate those things. And I have the guys who specialize in expats.
Awesome. There's one other question that we had, which was from Amanda. She said she enjoyed public health care that she received when she paid taxes in Europe. And she's saying, are you suggesting that you should use private health care?
That's really personal preference. So if you get a residency in Europe, Portugal, Italy, most of these countries, I believe with a small additional fee, we're talking like a couple €100 a year. I think in maximum a couple €1,000 a year will give you public health care. And that's really, personal preference. Private health care you can get for roughly 3,000 to 4,000 a year and go to private clinics, which is obviously next level up in terms of access to qualified professionals. So again, compared to U.S. healthcare costs, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Cool, awesome.
There was also the question about the foreign earned income benefits. No, you don't have to give up your U.S. passport to get that. Awesome. That is but you cannot be a U.S. resident to get those benefits. When I say U.S. resident, means you can't physically reside past the maximum amount of time to be considered a U.S. resident for tax purposes.
Cool. Awesome. Keep rolling. Great stuff.
Okay. I do want to talk about these briefly because if you don't want to spend the time, so some of those countries do require physical presence. Still, I'm not talking about Malta here because Malta, they're going to go through a significant change. The European Commission has challenged their citizenship program they say it's too transactional in nature. The Caribbean Citizenship by Investment programs still exist, and there may soon be a physical presence requirement 30 days in the first 5 years. But from a tax play perspective, all of these countries also have residence programs, so you can get yourself offshore tax exemption. You can see here on the column on the right, and if you that's even just being a resident. And if you want to become a citizen of those countries, these are the figures. Note that Dominica is now 200K. So why would you want Caribbean citizenship? Again, this is part of the play where, give you an example, like during COVID, if you were a US citizen, you had stay-at-home orders and you didn't have a second passport, or if you didn't have a second residency, you had to comply with those orders because you wouldn't be allowed on the plane. All the foreign countries had basically closed their borders to non-residents and non-citizens. And so having multiple citizenships, multiple residencies, no matter what, is always going to be your best bet because you're always going to have optionality. All these programs are visa-free to the European Schengen area. And most of them also have a treaty with Canada that if you've had a Canada visa in the past, then you're also visa free to Canada, which is a pretty cool loophole. So even if you wanted to stay in Canada, Caribbean, and Europe, you could do that just with one passport. Okay. All right. So the second. We didn't get how much time we have. Oh, we're about 40 minutes. Okay, so the one thing that we didn't talk about so far in terms of so we talked about some low cost ways for residency. The other programs that exist, which are what we call the golden visa programs. So the golden visa programs are essentially a passive investment. So what that means is there's no real physical presence requirement to maintain your eligibility. You buy a house in Greece, you invest 150K into the a qualified Hungarian investment fund. You invest in a qualified startup in Italy. You 500K into a qualifying fund in Portugal. You don't have to spend time in those countries. Most of them, you don't have to spend a certain amount of time in the country, but you do have to make that investment. And so obviously you need to be willing to part with $250,000 to $500,000 in order to be eligible for those. One other cool loophole that I've researched and found out recently is say you wanted to have one of the concepts that I talk about is building in redundancy into these programs because they constantly change. So that's why I talk about having multiple passports and multiple residencies, because if policies change, if programs get canceled, if one government turns their back on you because of whatever reason, in terms of the left party versus right party, immigrant versus non-immigrant favored governments, then having redundancy built into your strategy is always a really good idea. So literally you can have a residence permit in Portugal, but you can have an investor visa in Italy, or you can have a Caribbean passport, an Armenian residency, in both of those things. And basically you just make yourself untouchable because you always have so many options that you can just leave at the press of a button and go to any other place that you need. So in summary, I think these are the core tenets that I wanted to cover today. Happy to answer questions, and if there's any.
Yeah, I got a couple, and then I'll take from the group, and then I wanted to open up a lot of opportunity for Q&A, guys, and this has been great. For those of you guys I can unmute, but it seems like there's a couple questions on basically the terminology. So donation versus investment, and then just because it says donation there. So what's the deal with that?
Yeah. So donation is essentially you are giving away. In all cases now in Europe, not in Europe, in the Caribbean, is a minimum of 200,000. So donation is going to be 200,000, and if you invest in real estate, it's going to be more than that.
Gotcha. Okay, so the donation is true.
And so donation is you just give it away.
You're just giving it away, and then the return for that saving should be the upside for that. Okay.
Yeah.
And we had one other question was, I think Rob's asked about investment, but then saying willing to part. So you mentioned for like the Italy startup program, the Hungary thing. Just clarify that term if you can.
Yes. So I'll go through them one by one. So starting from the West, Portugal, you're looking at either a 200,000 euro donation, which essentially you're not going to get anything back from that. So it's just a pure donation, or a $500,000 investment into a qualifying investment fund. You have to hold your investment there for 5 years before you can apply either for citizenship or permanent residency. So when I say part with, there's plenty of good investment products out there, but you just have to know that money is at least going to be tied up and subjected to the risks or the performance of that fund. And some of these funds do have tie-up periods that are 7 or 8 years rather than 5. So again, I can help you navigate that based on your risk profile and what you'd like to do. So that's Portugal. Spain, they've canceled their program. Then going over to Italy. So Italy has 250,000 in an innovative startup, or 500,000 in Italian company shares. Again, I have specific projects and options for any of these things that I mentioned. And what was the other question? Yeah, so you're going to do those investments, and they are at-risk investments. So if it's 250K in an innovative company, theoretically you could lose all your money. Same with 500K in company shares. Obviously, if you're investing in company shares, if you're investing like Ferrari or the National Power Grid or any of these blue chip Italian companies, those also qualify. So there's a limited downside risk for certain types of investments.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah. So when I asked about going back to the Europe slide, which it looks like you're on, so Janice was looking at that, I think, and I think we're on the right one there. Could you just touch on for a second because Brad's asking about it, and it came up a few times when I was asking people what they wanted to hear today. I know it varies widely, but just like how, if you have different ancestry that ties to different countries, what should people be thinking about if they're in that situation?
Yes, roughly 50% of Americans qualify for citizenship by descent. Now, you would qualify based on your bloodline or your ancestry, but the tricky part in all of these things is there's a lot of nuance to each one of these programs. And so if you do have second, third generation, that we're talking about here, we have a citizenship by descent specialist firm that we work with. We're not talking about a lot of money. I think it's roughly $10,000 to go through the process. and they will help you first see if you're eligible or not, and then secondly help you piece together the paperwork to submit the application. Certain programs are changing. So for example, Germany changed recently. Italy has changed recently. Unfortunately, that was one of the best ones. There was nearly 60 million people globally who qualified for Italian citizenship by descent, was the same amount of Italians that live in Italy. But yeah, there's many routes. So Lithuania, Poland, most of these European countries have citizenship by descent. And the best thing is, if you think you might be eligible, I'll just get you access to the eligibility form, and you can check with our preferred solution provider for that.
Yeah, look, I think, a lot of people, Rob commented in here, he's like, his brother did the thing with Italy, but they suspended it, so now he can't do it. And that kind of happened, like my family had the same thing a little bit. We were looking at options. And to your point, it's very nuanced, because for us, we had to go back to my great-grandparents, and it was also based off of who was a citizen first before they got married. And like, there's some very specific things that are required, but it's definitely something, some of these programs can change, like Rob's saying. So if you're like questioning that, it's worth looking into for sure, because that might be an opportunity that's open now that could change based on your country too. So David asked, what would you recommend if I'm already planning to live for at least the next year in Mexico? He was asking about the foreign earned income. He was the same person asking about that too.
Yeah. So the foreign. So even if you are if you're working for a U.S. company, so basically a lot of it has to do with, are you working for a U.S. company right now? So then we need to look at your, how your income is being structured with your current employer, and there may be some nuance around, for example, doing it as a consulting contract rather than as an employment contract, because I think they'll make certain contributions. And then, as far as I'm aware, even if you're working for a U.S. company but you're residing outside full time, you would be eligible for the foreign earned income exclusion. Again, I would want to double check that with you with a U.S. tax advisor, but I have friends who are doing that, so I think that in most cases it should be possible.
Awesome. Beautiful. And guys, keep lighting up the chat with questions that you have. Matt, I'll come back, or Mark, I'll come back to yours in a second. But one thing, Matt, I wanted you to hit on. So let's say like my situation, right? Right now, the thing that I'm interested in is looking at digital nomad visas, residency options that aren't passports or like citizenships. So could you just give a quick overview? And basically, guys, like the outcome for this is someone that's like, hey, I just want to be able to spend more time without the Schengen zone requirement. For those that don't know, in the EU, if you're not an EU citizen or hold a passport, there's a 90-day limitation out of every 180 days that you can spend in Europe. Bryn, my fiance, and I are like, we love being in Europe. We want to split time between the States and Europe more. We're considering looking at some of these longer term plays for maybe some like passport options. But ultimately for us, just being able to spend 5 months, 6 months without having to think about bouncing around countries would be ideal for us. So can you share about some of those paths to more on the mobility side than the tax side?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll give Portugal as a good example, because they have probably the broadest number of categories that I'm aware of. So starting from the top, Portugal's digital nomad visa is called the D8. And essentially what that is you have to prove that your income is at least the minimum livable salary for a Portuguese person. And you need to have that amount of money in your bank account when you apply. So it's basically times 12, and you have to have proof that you have that income, ongoing. It does have a requirement also that theoretically you're supposed to spend 183 days plus, which also does make you a tax resident. But most of these digital nomad programs also do have some caveats that when you go for the renewal, if you can justify why you were out of the country for more than 6 months, for business purposes, for visiting family, for illnesses, for whatever, then there is some flexibility. But again, that's up to interpretation of the Immigration Bureau, and it's not a surefire guarantee that you will get your renewal. So the digital nomad category typically works best for people who are willing to spend 6+ months in one country.
Got it. And those are, how long are they usually good for?
Portugal is 2 years. I believe it varies between 1 and 2 years, depending on the country. So Portugal has it, Malta has it, Spain has it. I'm pretty sure Greece has it as well. Italy also has it. So most of Western Europe has a digital nomad visa. or
Awesome.
something similar. There's
Cool.
another category, which is typically called, we can call it independent means or passive income type visas. So those are ones where you get a regular dividend, you get a pension, you get some other source of income that is consistent and verifiable. That essentially means I don't need earned income. I don't need to have a salary in order to live. And you just prove that you have that ongoing passive income coming to you. That can be high yield savings accounts, that can be dividends, that can be so many different things. And those exist across most European countries as well. In Portugal, that's called the D7. In Spain, it's called I think it's called the independent means visa. And they have various names, but it's all basically the same thing, passive income visa. And then all these countries also have what are called entrepreneurial type visas. So if you come and set up a company in the country, then they'll give you a visa. Each country has some of its own requirements, such as a number of people that need to be employed by that company. Some of them do have, capital injection requirements, how much you would have to invest in the company, all these kinds of things. What they're trying to avoid is essentially paper companies for the purpose of getting a visa. So there are certain requirements, but that's a good option for many people if you intend to spend a lot of time in Europe.
Awesome. So Barton asked, do you have to set up a company in Portugal for the nomad visa to work? I've heard that you do.
No, you do not.
Cool. Yeah, basically what you're saying is you just have to have proof of like the D7, I think, was proof of the income, and then the D8 you said
D8.
so you have to have the amount in your account or whatever what it was.
Yeah, D8 was the proof of your regular income and a certain amount of savings when you apply.
Cool. Awesome. Timothy asked a good question. I think that might be good. I'll read it aloud. He said, Matt, I just sold my company. I have Irish heritage and my wife is Italian. I have over $1 million a year in passive income moving forward and have set up trust for my daughters. I would like to get them a second citizenship as well. Any suggestions for high net worth?
Yeah, Tim, I think the short answer would be, the real second citizenship, the direct routes by investment, are Caribbean. Those are really good. You could pair that with a European residency if you wanted. And also Italy, or depending where you want to go, Ireland. I personally think the Irish passport is one of the best on the planet because it's visa-free access to the UK, also visa-free access to Schengen. And it has very low tax comparatively. So there's very interesting things you can do from a corporate structuring perspective in Ireland. So if you have the ability to get an Irish passport, I would definitely grab that one.
Awesome.
But Mark, so who was that before that? Tim, I think given your situation, it might be worthwhile for us to have a chat, because at a certain level of income, you can do a lot more things.
Absolutely.
We can get really clever with how we plan.
Speaking of that, guys, I just dropped a link. So Matt does do calls. These are paid consults. Obviously, his time here that's been free has been very valuable. So for those that are interested, there will be a few slots. We've got about 5 slots open for people. Just again, he doesn't do a lot of like one-off things. He's usually working with ultra high net worth individuals, putting together very comprehensive plans. But we've got a great relationship here, so I wanted to get access to you guys for a pretty discounted rate to just get a little more of some custom support from Matt and intros that he may have. So for those that are interested, the link is there. You could pay for a 1-hour call with him and get a consultation and strategy. So Matt, if you can just cover a little bit, like if people are going to consider booking with you, what are some of the, obviously you laid out a lot of the different things here, but what are some of the things that they might be able to discuss with you more one-on-one if they decide to chat with you?
Yeah, so the pillars that we talked about, let's say those are the core tenets, but especially when it comes down to wealth protection and succession. So someone was mentioning trusts here. So choosing trusts versus foundations, which jurisdictions to choose, tax optimization strategies depending specific to the countries that you want to get residence or citizenship from. We obviously need to look at where you're going to be spending your time, and there's a few more options that I did not put on this on the slides. So anything investment related to get a visa, so we can go into any of the golden visa options. And quite frankly, there's 150 plus countries in the world that offer some kind of residence program or citizenship program. So the ones that I'm putting on these slides, this is not an exhaustive list by any means. What I highlighted to you guys are what I would call the basically the no-brainer strategies where you can do very little, invest very little, and get so much in return in terms of a great second document, travel document, and citizenship.
Awesome. Very cool. Very helpful. Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of like, listening to you is kind of how I think a lot of people when they first hear credit card points are probably thinking to me. I'm like, if you want the baseline in Amex Gold, you can't go wrong with that, right? And there's like some recommended dosages, but for those that are spending more, you're traveling more, you got a certain setup, you want suite upgrades, and you care about this, like that's why we customize our plans for clients. And the same thing for you, because everyone's got different goals, different outcomes, reasons, passports, heritage, investments, timing, so many factors. So worthwhile for those that want to. Again, the link is in the chat. I'll drop it one more time.
Sure.
Guys, any other people have questions here? Rob asked about, do you know anything about El Salvador citizenship program, Bitcoin related?
Yes, I do. And I work with the only firm that I'm aware of that has successful applications for that program.
So could you explain a little bit about what that is for those that don't know?
Yeah, I believe the equivalent amount is the equivalent of 1 million USD in Bitcoin. And I believe it's a donation, it's essentially a donation, and you get the El Salvadorian passport. I have not spent that much time on it because it's very expensive and there's been very few success cases with it, but El Salvador passport is actually quite good. I'm almost certain it's visa-free to Schengen. And all of these Latin American countries, as far as I'm aware, I would need to fact check this before putting you into any one of them, but they have a loophole, called loophole. You said loophole on the name of the presentation, so I keep saying that. Let's say they have a reciprocal agreement with Spain that if you hold a passport from many of the Spanish ex-Spanish colonies, you have a fast-track route to both residency and citizenship in Spain in 2 years, which is just a ridiculous arrangement, because you could get for example, I need to check if El Salvador qualifies, but if you got any of those Central or South American passports that I listed before, or El Salvador, then you could get the Spanish passport very easily within 2 years if you then move to Spain.
It's like playing. You got to collect one piece and then stack it up. Awesome, guys. What other questions you guys have? Anything else for Matt about passports, visas, residencies? This has been super informative. Thank you for coming on to share this. I want to give a couple extra minutes. Is there a benefit to having a second passport if you're keeping your US? That's from Eric. So Eric, I think you were here the whole time, but Matt covered a little bit of that. So you should want to reiterate some of those benefits beyond renouncing your passport and keeping it.
Okay, so let's say if you're keeping your US passport, so let's say, for example, we'll give Europe as an example. So current visa-free arrangement between the US and Europe is 90 days out of any 183 day period. So you can effectively spend 6 months in Europe with your US passport. But if you ever wanted to live more than that, you would either need a visa or a European passport. Another obvious, what I personally think is quite obvious benefit is if you look at tax rates in the United States, if you look at cost of living in the United States, if you look at cost of living in the United States, some of the social issues in the United States, and then if you have an expat life, some of the changes that have come through in the two previous administrations. I had never seen this before in any other country, but the United States put in a retroactive tax law. So I don't know if you can understand what that might mean, but some income that was tax-free up until 2017 was then retroactively taxed back to 1984. So I don't want to get too I don't want to be a fearmonger, but any country that's willing to retroactively tax me, which basically means that I had zero way to plan for that, it kind of scares me. So having an alternative passport means that if whatever happens in US or whatever country that is your primary citizenship, if you had to immediately or very quickly give up one of your passports, you have to have a backup. You can't go stateless. Or you can go stateless, but it's very dangerous. Basically, you're not associated with any country.
Awesome. Great question.
And your kids will get it. Your kids will get it as well. So if you have kids and you have a second passport, your kids will be eligible.
Awesome. Mark asked, great information, Matt. Back to your first strategy slide, structure your income offshore. Can you implement that strategy without actually moving out of the country or living a certain number of days outside of the US? With kids in school, some flexibility is limited.
Where's that one? I just want to read that one properly.
Mark Hillman, it's MH. The brief is the initials.
Let me see if I can expand
the
this.
Third one from the bottom right now.
Okay, third one from the bottom.
Well, yeah.
So the offshore income strategy, if you're a full tax resident of the United States, I think I'm quite certain there's very little you can do in that regard. Because once you're a tax resident of the US, then essentially all of your income is going to be taxed in whatever way, federal or state rules apply to you. So the first major hack is you have to be willing to spend the time outside.
And Matt, quick question: what we didn't touch on was Puerto Rico.
Yep.
Can you share a little bit about Puerto Rico? I think one of the gentlemen here that's been commenting in quite a bit is, I think Noah said he might be down there. But that's obviously a big tax haven for Americans without having to give up the U.S. passport. Could you just touch on some of the strategies there?
Yeah. So Puerto Rico has a piece of legislation called Act 60, I believe is the legislation. And the Act 60, essentially, if you become a tax resident of Puerto Rico, and I believe that there's a number of other requirements, but you can effectively get 4% corporate income tax rate, I believe. And I'm not sure about personal income, but I know that there's a significant benefit if you just want to move down to Puerto Rico. But you do actually have to move there because there's been a lot of people said that they were living in Puerto Rico and went under the Act 60, but weren't actually meeting the physical presence requirements and have later triggered audits and a lot of, we'll say the IRS and other people chasing them for kind of trying to game the system. And that can be a mess.
Totally. Yeah, that seems to be the biggest hub for those that are in that situation where they want the tax benefits and they keep the U.S. passport is one of those strategies I've seen quite a bit. Gemma asks, we'll do one last question here. If you have a US and UK passport but are still looking to get a European one, is it possible to get the third one without giving up one of the others?
I'm almost certain that I know the US allows dual citizenship, and I'm almost certain that the UK also allows dual citizenship. So the short answer would be yes, depending on which European country. And I think most now allow you to have dual citizenship or more. Yes, Germany, I think, did not allow it for a period of time, and I think that's one of the recent changes. So depends on the country, we can check, but I believe most of them, yes.
Awesome. Fantastic. Guys, well, we're going to wrap here. Matt, thank you so much for all your time and your knowledge. Guys,
Thanks,
this is something that, again, if anything, it should really just make you think bigger and create more possibilities about how you're thinking about where you live, where you're spending your time, the lifestyle you're creating. Everyone that's on this call, we're fortunate to have entrepreneurial skills, mindsets, freedom with the internet to build businesses from our laptops if we want and really create a life that's, we've never had opportunities on the planet to do what we're able to do here. So hopefully this, for some of you guys, I'm sure will be a next step into a whole new trajectory in your life. And you can speak with Matt. I'll drop the link for that down below. And for others, it could just be something to really inspire you about new possibilities and save some things for later on. So Matt, I will see you for dinner here shortly. Is there any last parting words before we wrap?
Last parting words from me.
Anything yet? We have actually you have your event. Why don't you share a little bit about that? The events people can come to.
Yeah. So if you're in the U.S., I hold 2 conferences per year in the U.S. One in New York and one in Los Angeles. We also did Miami last year. It was a big year with the impending U.S. elections. You're also welcome to catch me anywhere around the world. We host conferences in South Africa this year, as well as China. So I will drop also my LinkedIn profile if people want to connect with me there. And what I would say is the treasure that the treasure that you desire is in the cave that you fear. So be bold and take some leaps. And it's going to be a lot easier than you think.
I love it. Awesome, guys. Well, Matt, thank you again. Guys, this will be recorded and sent out to you. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. You got the link to book with Matt. We'll put the link for that in the follow-up email again. There's going to be some limited spots. So if it's timed out and there's no slots left, then maybe we'll be able to set something else up for you. But for those that grab one, you guys will have a great time there. So see y'all soon. Have a great one.